Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert, covering a woke media meltdown as the Marvels get canceled by Disney. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. From Newsweek, Disney gives up on the Marvels. From Forbes, The Marvels is officially the lowest grossing MCU movie. Undeservedly so. The woke people over at Forbes are upset that the Marvels didn't get to make money. You may remember Forbes from such woke hits as 3 Ways to Decenter Whiteness in Your Workplace, which was so racist and so out of line that they were forced to create a new headline called 3 Ways to Transform Your Workplace to be more equitable. Part of the issue with this is that Disney is getting tremendous pressure from outside activist investor Nelson Peltz and his associate Ike Perlmutter, former CEO of Marvel. Iger has said himself he knows that the movies are very emblematic and representative of what quality and what potential Disney has as a business. Their movies are flopping all over the place. Disney cannot afford to have more and more high-profile flops. They can't control that much at this point, but what they can do is do things like delay Snow White for a year, which is what they did. They can stop reporting the terrible box office results of the Marvels. Who knows when the media picks up another story about that? Disney is very well aware. People are watching the company very closely, and there is plenty of conservative and normal media and YouTube people that will create narratives that will put the word out as we see failure. Additionally, if the Marvels was going to stay in theaters and it was going to continue to be promoted, they would need to back it up with even more promotional dollars and also deal with their theater distributors, who at this point are also no doubt frustrated that they have empty theaters. It's bad enough with the Marvels, they have the same problem with their new movie, Wish. Well, this was inevitable. After setting records for lowest opening weekend and biggest second week drop in the MCU, the Marvels will set its final unfortunate record, the worst earning MCU movie of all time. While it hasn't quite left theaters yet, it's expected to barely make any more money from there, and as Variety estimates, it will only earn $197 million worldwide, maybe crawling over the $200 million mark if lucky. That is, in fact, the lowest grossing MCU movie of all time. And here's who it compares to. Keep in mind, none of these numbers are adjusted for inflation. If they were, these numbers would be higher than they're represented here. Iron Man, $585 million. Ant-Man, $519 million. Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, $476 million. Thor, $449 million. Shang-Chi, $432 million. Eternals, $402 million. Black Widow, $379 million. Captain America, the First Avenger, $370 million. The Incredible Hulk, $264 million. That came out in 2008. That was 15 years ago. And the Marvels at $197 million. That would put the Marvels at around half of the take of Black Widow, which also had competition from Disney streaming it on Disney Plus as a premium pay-per-view offer. Still, it did hurt the Black Widow box office on some level. What would you notice from here? A few things. The list has some of the earliest MCU movies, the ones that first established heroes like Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America before the MCU really blew up into the stratosphere. Then the other half of the list, all movies from the post-Endgame era, like Shang-Chi and Quantumania. But even something heralded as a fail like Eternals is still in the mid-range there, and the Marvels is half that. It's just a wild, wild drop, especially for a movie that's a sequel to one that made $1 billion at the box office. And yes, it's true that Captain Marvel made $1 billion at the box office, leveraging off the success of the 2 Avengers films. Marvel has been pretty brutal about the Marvels, with Bob Iger saying there wasn't enough executive supervision on set, and Nia DiCosta facing all sorts of slander about her comments and actions as director, despite being the highest grossing opening weekend for a movie directed by a black woman. It's incredible that they'll say it's the highest grossing movie from a black woman, sure, but it's also the biggest failure. It's not an accomplishment unless you succeed at what you're trying to do. The movie did score lower with critics than most, but critics have been skewing lower on almost all MCU movies lately. Quantumania did even worse, and there was no mass review bombing campaign this time, with fans actually seeming to like the movie for the most part. There were a few people that were interested in seeing the Marvels. They went, they saw it, that was it. 65% of the audience that went to see the Marvels were men. People who are obviously wired really tightly into the Marvel brand and will watch anything. However, that's a small percentage of the universe of people that should be seeing a movie like this. As the author has said before, this was the wrong movie at the wrong time, an inflection point of superhero fatigue, MCU aimlessness, and other potentially more relevant movies to come, like Deadpool 3, the only MCU film out next year, after delays, drawing on big names like Wolverine. The Marvels may have set all these dismal records, but the author doesn't think it deserves them. And stacked up against the full catalog of the MCU, there are many worse movies, and it feels like 3 to 4 years ago, this could have tripled these box office totals. Bad luck, and there's too much blame being thrown around here, even by Disney itself. Sad to see. But there's a few things that this author doesn't know about. Yes, Bob Iger did correctly blame Nia DiCosta by saying there was not enough supervision on the film when the Marvels was being made. The director is responsible for the film. If the film did really, really well, if it did $4 billion, we'd be praising Nia DiCosta and talking about how she's a genius. And the truth of it is, if it did do $4 billion, she should be treated that way. It's all merit. But that's not the whole story. The authors of this really important book, MCU: The Reign of Marvel Studios, which talks about the creation of Marvel Studios and the Marvel Cinematic Universe brand, wrote a really compelling article in Fortune, giving you an additional insight, their insight, into how the failure of the Marvels marks the end of an era of not just Marvel being a can't-lose brand, but also how the Marvel studio has been being run as a really sloppy production process. The Marvels opened this month with the lowest box office numbers of any of the 33 movies of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. While that obviously isn't good news for Marvel Studios, it's not as if the producers suddenly forgot how to make entertaining movies. Audiences will likely show up again, especially when an MCU movie has Avengers or X-Men in the title. But it does mark the end of an era of unquestioned dominance, and because Marvel has set the pace for Hollywood for the past 15 years, its current situation helps illuminate Hollywood's future trajectory. While some fans might say that the history of Marvel Studios is bookended by Fantastic Four movies or Blade movies, the studio's history isn't delineated by cosmic rays or vampire hunters, but by writers' strikes. The Writers Guild of America went on strike from 2007 to 2008 and again this year. In between those two labor disputes, Marvel Studios built itself into one of the dominant players in Hollywood, transforming from a scrappy independent studio owned by a struggling toy company into the Disney division responsible for the most successful movie franchise of all time, 32 movies grossing $29.5 billion. Each of those strikes forced Marvel to answer questions about how it was going to make entertainment about superheroes. In 2007, the studio was scrambling to finish the first movie, Iron Man, before the WGA prohibited its members from contributing any future work. The movie had been shot and edited and was coming together in post-production, except that the final battle between Tony Stark and his rival Obadiah Stone was a boring slugfest between two men in metal suits, lacking the character and the wit that animated the rest of the movie. Just before the WGA told its members pencils down, screenwriters Art Markham and Matt Holloway concocted a new scene where Stark would realize Thane's suit would ice up at high altitude, letting him win victory with brains rather than brawn. Because it was too late for significant reshoots, and because actor Jeff Bridges wasn't available, they wrote it to make use of as much pre-existing footage as possible, heavily supplemented with CGI. When director Jon Favreau and producer Kevin Feige implemented that last-minute solution, they unwittingly established three core principles of Marvel Studios. One, long-planned ideas could be ruthlessly scrapped at any point if a better option presented itself. 2. Special effects work best when they were reflections of character, not just expensive light shows. 3. Up against the deadline, CGI was the best solution for almost any problem. Applied, those principles led to crushing workloads for the studio's digital artists, many subcontracted through visual effects houses, and helped explain the unsatisfying nature of some of Marvel's recent movies and TV shows. This brought on the creeping nature of narrative vagueness, poor storytelling. Over the years, having the freedom to change anything at the last minute devolved into storytelling that felt mushy because the writers needed to keep their options open in case the studio asked for a sudden revision to the ending. Probably because of the corporate imperative to set up an entirely different project. Jack Schaefer, the head writer of WandaVision, told the author that, on that 2021 Disney Plus series, quote, "The finale was just this ongoing question, which is pretty typical for Marvel projects. The climax of a Marvel movie is just iterated and iterated until the end." By 2023, that narrative vagueness was costing Marvel Studios some serious money. The 6-part Secret Invasion series cost over $200 million, more than either Barbie or Oppenheimer. A huge chunk of that money went to reshoots and last-minute CGI patches that didn't save the show from witheringly negative viewer reactions. The strikes this year, in tandem with the end of the streaming wars, gave Marvel Studios a much-needed pause and a chance to sort through the glut of TV shows it had developed for Disney+. Studio head Kevin Feige has already made some painful decisions. Halfway through the shoot of the 18-episode TV series Daredevil Born Again, he decided that the show wasn't working, dismissed the head writers, and went back to the drawing board. You can imagine how many hundreds of millions of dollars that cost. After years of eschewing TV conventions like pilots and showrunners, Marvel has recognized that there's a reason the industry used them. Adopting traditional methods might help sharpen Marvel's storytelling, and it brings the studio in accord with the provisions of the recently negotiated deal between the WGA and the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. This is good because the next front of Hollywood labor conflict is already opening up, and it's all about digital labor. This is really amazing to even think that Marvel takes on producing TV shows and comes up with its own undisciplined production process, unlike all other TV show production. There is no excuse to say, well, we're Marvel, so we just do it our way. Okay, that's fine if the results are there from a creative standpoint, from a cost standpoint, from a turnaround time standpoint. That would be okay to develop your own unique way of developing a studio. But just to do it as a big mishmash, have bad results in quality and tremendous cost overruns is beyond absurd, and it never should have happened. One of the sticking points in the recently settled Screen Actor Guild strike was that actors want to be able to control their own digital representations and not be turned into pixel puppets. And that Marvel attitude towards fixing movies late in the process, just lean on the CGI artist, has pervaded Hollywood and made the working life of many digital specialists into a miserable grind, because they would give revisions back to talent and not really pay that CGI talent for the extra revisions. It was part of the contract. That's outrageous. Those people are not paid well. They can't afford to take the responsibility for financing Marvel's productions. In September, Marvel's visual effects artists voted to unionize. If it becomes more expensive for studios like Marvel to do last-minute digital patches, that might spur the industry to be less improvisational about its storylines. Hollywood may mark 2023 as a turning point, not because Marvel Studios had its first box office flop, but because it was the year that studios had to negotiate the terms of our digital future. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.